How's it going, everybody? We're back. It's mailbag time again here at Guerilla Sports. We're talking all things Avs and NHL in today's mailbag. We put out the call for questions, and as always, you guys come through in droves, so we siphoned through the questions that we got this week, landed on a few good ones. So let's get into it, answer your guys' questions this week. Again, we're doing this every week, so if you don't get your question in this time, no worries. We'll be right back at it again next week. Starting off, Avs goaltending for the future. Will this be Georgiev's last year as an Av? I think so. That's my hunch. That's my prediction. That is nothing against Alexander Georgiev. I just think that given the inconsistency that we've seen out of him the last 2 seasons, it's going to take a pretty special effort from him this year to make the Avs feel comfortable enough going forward that they are willing to make another commitment to him. This is his final year of the deal that he signed with the Avs when he first got to Colorado. So if he doesn't really do something special this year to show that he should be the number one, my guess is this is likely it for Georgiev here in Colorado. Is there any news from Altitude concerning making games more accessible? I could sit here and go into things that we've heard, folks I've talked to, the current state of RSNs. The short answer is no. Nope. There is no update on Altitude coming to any kind of agreement with a large platform distributor to provide their games to the public. There's also no rumblings that I'm hearing about them starting any kind of streaming service, anything like that for the Kroenke Sports teams. So based on the information that I've got right now, things can always change. Looks like we'll be heading into yet another Avalanche and Nuggets season where the fan base will not be able to watch them in the local market. Do you think McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and Drouin will best their goal and points totals from last season? Nate, that's a high bar. That's a high bar to hit. So I'll say Nate probably comes in less than what he did last year. Mikko, I think, will have a better year than he did last year. Kale, I think, will have a better year than he did last year. And I think Jonathan Drouin sets new career highs again this year in Colorado. So I think 3 of those continue, take another step forward. Nathan McKinnon, it's not that I don't think he could play that caliber in that range again. It's a pretty high bar to hit. All right, I really like this question. Since covering the Avs, is there one thing that stands out that has changed your perspective on the NHL or the Avalanche as an organization? Going from a fan of the game to a person covering it must lend itself to some eye-opening things. I cannot stress this enough. I think I was just having this conversation the other day with the person who's sitting here to my right that, yes, this job absolutely changes your perspective on not just the league and the team that you cover, but professional sports as a whole. We hear people talk all the time about these athletes and professionals, and they say, oh, they're just people. Don't be nervous, they're just people. That's the one thing I have really learned more than anything else. These are regular people who have regular day-to-day struggles and who are at work. And there are some days when, work is tough and you don't want to be there. It's definitely changed the way that I view the rest of the league. Teams that, you grow up. I was a young kid when I first got into hockey. And, you have your teams that you like and your teams that you root against and things like that. And I've just gotten to the point where I really don't. I don't have any teams that I root for. I don't really have any teams that I root against. Now, sure, I'm still involved in the industry. There are fan bases and there are things about certain teams, organizations, fan bases that I don't like, me personally, but I really don't. My perspective on it all has changed. For my favorite team, or what was my favorite team growing up, I no longer, lose sleep after losses or, feel the incredible jovialness of big wins. I love being in the moments, and I can really appreciate the games for what they are. I've never loved my relationship with hockey more than it is right now, but it's very different than it was, say, 10 years ago. Maybe you've spoken already on this, and I completely misread that. Maybe you've already spoken to this, but what do you make of Trennan's recent comments that Nashville was a tighter team and the Avs had small cliques of guys? The Avs seem to lack some chemistry since the Cup run. Have you noticed a change in the locker room? Look, I think whenever you have a Stanley Cup team, a team that gets over the finish line, it's a special group. And there's special level of commitment in those locker rooms, and there's a special level of cohesiveness. I still don't think people fully understand what goes into winning a Stanley Cup and how many things have to go perfectly right. So I think it's a fair assessment to say the chemistry has not matched what it was in 2022. How could it? I still think it's a really tight-knit group, and I think the Avs have been in a weird space the last couple of years without Gabe Landeskog. You've been trying to find the new 2C, and I think you had a bunch of guys come in last year who weren't part of the championship group and who were being looked at to be part of the next wave of players. And I just think from early on, there was a little bit of the new guys versus the old guys. And I don't ever think it was contentious. I don't ever think it became a problem in the locker room. But I do think that it was maybe a little bit different than what we had seen in a couple seasons past. I don't think it's an issue. I think you got really strong leadership in that locker room. And I think going forward, you're going to see a lot of emphasis put back on culture and the way that things run in that room. What's the deal with Mikko? We talked about it a couple weeks ago. My sources tell me that that deal is inching toward the finish line. But as I mentioned earlier in the week on a show, until it's done, all it is close. And things can always change. So while I feel confident that that one is inching towards the finish line here soon before training camp opens, it's not done till it's done. All right, we're going to wrap up the week with this one. And I'll be honest, it's maybe not a great one to end on because I don't have a great answer. How did all the guys get their nicknames? Example, Mikko Rantanen's the Moose, Nathan McKinnon's the Dog, Josh is the Manimal. Nate, I know that one comes from Nate Dogg, who is a 90s, early 2000s rapper, hip-hop artist. Nate's a big hip-hop guy himself, so I know that's where that one comes from. The Moose, I think the Moose is a fan-created one. Then Josh Manson, man, he's a big guy, really physical player, Manimal. Hockey players are not historically overly creative with nicknames, though everyone gets one. Moose, I do think that was more of a fan-driven one, kind of like the Condor for Eric Johnson. That's fan, that's broadcast, that's other people bringing that one to popularity. But to the best of my knowledge, that's how some of those nicknames came about. I always think it's interesting. Maybe I'll make a point of that this year in the locker room to find out where nicknames came from. But that's all we got for the mailbag this week. More coming next week as we are in the throes of the offseason. Keep the questions coming. We're inching closer towards the start of training camp and regular season. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next week.